Howdy everyone. Welcome back to Harp and Guitar, People and Music. So for today I wanted to continue our journey back in time and down south for a little bit of blues history. And in the previous video we were talking a little bit about sort of pre-blues or proto-blues, things that right around the turn of the century weren't quite considered, proper blues structure yet, but definitely you could see that this was the birth of what would soon become the blues. And today what I wanted to talk about were a couple of other forms of proto-blues besides what was previously talked about with work songs and field hollers. So today I wanted to talk about three other forms of early or proto-blues. And these are again right around the same time period, just slightly after field hollers and work songs. Once things started to be recorded into the turn of the 20th century, right around the early 1900s to about 1910, 1913, somewhere in that neighborhood. Now these three early proto-blues types were ballads, rags, and reels. Now, obviously a ballad is just what it sounds like, ballads. These were sort of emotionally moving and stirring folk songs, usually kind of a slower tempo type of song that one would sing to himself or play an instrument, whether it's guitar or piano, and accompany themselves while performing, maybe performing in smaller sort of groups for loved ones or family, that sort of thing. Now the second one were called rags. And rags they're kind of funny because some of the early blues artists like Blind Blake and Georgia Tom and a lot of these guys, Papa Charlie Jackson, when they first started out, they were calling a lot of their songs rags. The St. Louis Rag or the Memphis Rag. And within a couple of years, a lot of these guys were re-recording these songs almost identical to the original and then calling them the St. Louis Blues or the Memphis Blues instead of rag. But these early proto-blues like rags, to me the rag is almost like sort of half blues and half jazz. To me rags is, blues slowly evolved into jazz and rags was that was sort of the stepping point or the bridge. Rags often had sort of a jazzy feel and used a lot of syncopation, and you often got instruments that were starting to become more sort of like a big band style ensembles, where you would have clarinets and small horn sections of 2 or 3 trumpet players and maybe a sax player. And then they started adding other instruments. So besides just, the sort of the basics of singer, guitar player, maybe a harp player, and maybe an upright bass player, and perhaps you'd have a percussionist in there somewhere, a washboard player or a drummer or something like that. But rags, as I mentioned, it started sort of expanding on that and adding, woodwinds and different instruments and that sort of thing. Now the third one were called reels. And that's kind of a little bit of a strange term, or a bit of a misleading term, because some of the older blues cats, even to the 50s, would refer to their songs or their earlier songs as reels, and that's R-E-E-L, like a reel-to-reel tape. And that's sort of what's misleading about it, is because they call them reels, you would lead one to think that they were recorded on a reel-to-reel tape. But obviously we're talking pre-tape here. This is even pre-record. Reels were actually one single song recorded on a cylinder, kind of, roughly about the size of, this here soup can. And the song was recorded on the disc, on the cylinder disc, and you would put it into the player, and the stylus would go down, and this would rotate, and the song was recorded on it. So it was sort of a cylindrical precursor to records, and they were called reels. And you only got one song on it, and that was it. So if you went to the studio to record a reel, you went in and you would record a song, and then later that day, once the master cylinder was done, then they would press the other cylinders and send them out to distributors for sale. And later on, the term reels sort of evolved into the term sides, S-I-D-E-S, because now when you went to a recording studio to record a song, you actually had to have two songs, because they did away with the cylinder format and went to the record format, the 78. Here, I actually have one right here. This is an early blues record, a 78. This one happens to be from 1931. It's Frank Hutchison's The Train That Carried the Girl from Town, and then on the other side is Worried Blues. And Frank Hutchison was a really, really early blues recording artist. He played slide guitar, but he played on his lap. He played an acoustic on his lap, and recorded a lot of train songs. And he was from, I think he was from Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. And he was actually one of the earliest recorded blues artists of that time. You know, he started recording in, I think, 1929, 1930, and really on this format. It was very new. They did away with the cylinders in the late teens, early 1920s, and then started going with the that disc record, the flat disc record method, the 78 RPM. And they were made out of a shellac, sort of a blend, and they were pressed. So it was a lot easier to mass produce records, because they would record on the mother, and then they would use that mother to stamp a master copy, and then that master copy was used to just bang out all the other copies, and then the labels were attached, and off they went. So those are the sort of the three terms for early proto-blues. So you had ballads, rags, and reels. And incidentally, right around this time period, the 1910, right through to the late 20s, when cylinders and then 78s were recorded, there were no record stores or music stores. If you wanted to purchase a music cylinder for your cylinder player, or later a record disc for your phonograph player, you actually went to where you bought the players, which were furniture stores. And that's where the people of the South, you know, in the 1910s through the 1920s and even 30s, bought all of their blues and jazz recordings. And even early proto-blues was at furniture stores. So there you have it, for a little bit more of Whiskey's Blues history. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it was informative for you. Please let me know, and you know, give us some of your thoughts in the comments section. Please don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel as well. And once again, thank you very much for popping by and seeing us here at Harp and Guitar, People in Music. Look forward to seeing you again real soon. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.